I want to ask you about Trump, Charlie, because I know you'd run a piece about like Wall Street, where your sources are, and this is all really interesting. And I agree with. I mean, that's why I like you, Charlie. You're smart. I agree with you. Um, but you'd run a piece about Wall Street and the Trump, yeah, the charges and the trials, and that it wasn't causing the money to go away really. And I thought it was interesting that even former New York Governor Cuomo himself said that those charges, those felony charges, were bogus and they never would have been brought in if it wasn't a guy running for the White House and very seriously contending for it. Um, is that still the case? And in fact, is it even more accelerating now because of Joe Biden's infirmity? And is it also accelerating more because of October 7th?
Which part is the feeling that Trump is being persecuted?
Well, just the sense that Wall Street, you said that Wall Street wasn't afraid, or that there was no toxicity, relatively speaking, what despite all these charges. He's getting thrown all these different trials. But your piece was saying basically that Wall Street didn't really seem to care in terms of donations for him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think he's going to have plenty of money. I mean, some of it may go to pay his legal bills, but he's going to be able to raise money. I mean, I was the first to sort of signal that Steve Schwartzman, who's one of the richest people in America, the head of Blackstone, the big private equity firm, was moving towards reestablishing ties with Donald Trump. He was on his one of his advisory boards early on, was a supporter, got very turned off after the January 6th stuff, and is back. And then it became official. He's back. He put out a statement after about a week after I wrote the story. It was funny because they were trying to get me not to write the story. This just shows you something. It's one thing when someone tries to get you not to write the story because they say you got it wrong. That's not what they were saying. They were just begging me not to run the story because he was ready to come out and say he was for Trump. So I'm glad I didn't listen to him. But Wall Street has got a love-hate with Trump. I mean, to be honest with you, he didn't do the. I mean, listen, he cut taxes, that was good. Cut regulations, very good. Economy likes that. Also spent a ton of money. Kept spending throughout his last year in office, even when you didn't have to. When the stuff was opening up post COVID, as we were in the tail end. I mean, we have a real problem with debt in this country. It's 120%.
And the tariffs, too. The tariffs are a dreadful idea.
Tariffs are, just screwed over farmers. And I mean, he was told by smart people to be strategic about the tariffs in particular. Let's go after China in places where they really are horrible, right? Let's try to prevent them from stealing our intellectual property. Let's be targeted. Gary Cohn, who's his head of the NEC, told him that these sort of like blanket tariffs by the way, it probably took a percentage off of GDP during his time.
Well, it did. And also the thing that was the best thing against China was what he killed was the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It was not a trade bill as he ignorantly claimed. It was a reduction of tariffs and quotas on 40% of the world's economy. And it helped us more because our economy is already more open. So, again, that's what I hate about populism. It's anti-trade, and anti-trade means it's a blunt instrument which goes against so many things. Some of them are bad, but oftentimes even more of them are good. But I just want to get back to what you were saying before about Wall Street, because I think Wall Street is really amoral. Wall Street has done well under Trump and Biden. And I think that Wall Street likes to cover its bases, and they want to make sure that whoever wins is that they're not on the bad side.
I'm going to correct you on that. Even among Democrats on Wall Street, they don't like the policy that's coming out of this White House.
The stock market's at record highs, though.
We just make this point, and that's the Fed, and we can talk about why interest rates are driving markets and stuff like that. But I mean, first off, Trump's, his blind spot was clearly the heavy hand of tariffs. He was right on the money by calling attention to China early. Got to give him credit for that. But
I agree.
But the way he did it, it should have been much more focused and strategic, and he didn't. And that's a problem. And also the spending, definitely a problem. We're going to have to pay this stuff back. That said, the economic policy coming out of the White House is just dreadful. And even Wall Street liberals will tell you, You can't do deals because they hate deals. Just every deal they hate, every merger. They think if Microsoft buys Activision Blizzard, it's going to be a real problem for America because they bought a game show, a gaming online gaming opera. I mean, think about how ridiculous using the antitrust laws for something that sort of peculiar, and it's like minutia, but it does have an impact on the economic because if you can't get price discovery for products, if Warner Brothers or Paramount has only one bidder, one, because you can't get price discovery because this Justice Department won't let Apple buy it or won't let Amazon buy it, which is the case, well, then you don't really have a functioning market system. And I think that's one of the problems that the Biden administration has. There are literally leftists in every regulatory position, including maybe one of the worst, smartest people ever to serve in a government job is Janet Yellen. I mean, what has she done that's so good? She's missed inflation. She's printed. She basically she goes left when you got to go right. She goes right when you got to go left. I mean, she's got this horrible history, and yet she's like right there at the table. She's still there. So I think Wall Street. I think I would even think. Listen, the Hollywood people are Democrats, but even they will tell you the same stuff because I speak with them a lot. People that run studios. They are Democrat, but they're just really worried about how far left the Democratic Party has gone and how much Joe Biden has given into that. And I think that's why you're seeing Republicans that were like, never Trump after January 6th, can't do it, we're coming back. Because the alternative, he has his blind spots and his bad things. The alternative is this, and this is really bad right now.
Well, let's switch to your book because it's very interesting, and I know that maybe if you could just tell us for our viewers a little bit about your book and the motivations for you to write it and what the themes are, and then we can get into a little Q&A on it.
Sure. So, I guess around this time last year, but a little earlier, more like February, March, I was covering, all these banks, regional banks that were blowing up, including something known as the Silicon Valley Bank, which was like a rock star bank, like 6 months before that, that all of a sudden, we hit some interest rate sort of thing where rates were going up. Fed was raising rates, as you know, and its entire balance sheet was out of whack. And it essentially, this rock star bank imploded overnight. It had long-term liabilities and short-term, it had short-term liabilities and long-term assets. So it's a classic mismatch of assets and liabilities. And Carrie will tell you this from her days at Moody's, that this is like classic, you're about to blow up. I mean, it's what happened with Lehman Brothers, because when your liabilities, that means people come to you and say, give me my money back. They want it now, not when your invested bond, 30-year bond, even if it's a U.S. Treasury, matures. And if those bond prices aren't priced at par, you got to sell them at below par, below $1 for $1, and pay back the other guy his full Monty. Now, think about that's a classic mismatch. It's what happened to Silicon Valley Bank. They go under. But on top of them going under, it all starts coming out that while this sort of like these sort of changes in interest rates, where this sort of macroeconomic environment changed on them, there was this weird political story going on where they were engaging in all sorts of stuff that was, rampant virtue signaling about ESG and DEI. Their regulator who missed this whole thing was, so in support of Black Lives Matter. Like, where was she? Why was she looking at the balance sheet of Silicon Valley Bank? Why, instead of, supporting, this is the head of the San Francisco Fed, instead of supporting Black Lives Matter? It was just so bizarre. And I had a source who had worked there, and he told me what it was like. It was just one big, a lot of risk taking, a lot of virtue signaling. And so the initial thought was, let's do a book about how woke sort of corporate behavior infected a bank and caused it to blow up. So But then I said, as this stuff started happening, I was covering the whole Budweiser thing where, they put a trans woman in a beer commercial online and it just tanked their sales and people went nuts. And I was covering some Disney. I was a long time covering Disney, the Contretemps with Bob Bob Chapek, former CEO. And there was a bunch of stuff that was going on with him and the Florida law. And I went back to my agent, Jonathan Bronitsky, and I said, this is bigger. Let's do a bigger book. And that's what I did. And, and I covered this stuff for so long. So I knew Larry Fink. I knew BlackRock. And that became a huge part of the book. I've spent a lot of time talking to Larry Fink. And, I quote him in the book. I actually, I give him credit for talking to me and explaining his position on ESG. He became like the poster child for woke investing. And, and I explained how that hurt him personally, how it hurt the firm, how they backtracked out of it. So what I tried to do was open up to like what's going on, history of how we got to where politics has infused boardrooms and that sort of evolution, and then where we are today, which is a sort of recalibrating of DEI and everything, where companies are moving away from it, and why that is, because you essentially had a revolt of the American people right in the middle. So that's kind of what the book does. And it goes through BlackRock, it goes through Disney, it goes to the Anheuser-Busch Budweiser scenario, it goes to Target. Silicon Valley Bank is, I guess, in the end turned out to be in a 98,000 word book, probably 3,000 words, 2,000 words. I mean, it's just became like not a footnote, but just 5 pages or so. Kamala Harris does not factor in majorly, although I do bring up that DEI has been a hallmark of the Biden presidency. I mean, think about it. He picked her because she was a black woman. Ketanji Brown Jackson, because she was a black. He said point blank, "I'm going to pick a black woman Supreme Court justice." By the way, I'm sure she's a smart woman. I'm not saying she's stupid, but I'm just saying, if you look at some of her reasoning, I mean, her rationale for, I guess, being on the other side of the affirmative action opinion was that black doctors, she cited a study that said black doctors are better at delivering black babies than white doctors. I mean, she actually said that. By the way, I can find you a study about the, health benefits of cannibalism. I've actually found that as well. But I mean, studies like any.
Yeah, and I agree. First of all, it's stupid even if you're going to end up appointing a black woman as vice president or a black woman to Supreme Court, say I'm going to appoint the best person, then appoint a black woman. Because otherwise people will say, well, I know she's the best black woman, but was she the best, most qualified person? It's just common sense, right?
Doesn't do anybody any good, and it's further racializing the country in ways it need not be. We should be saying I'm picking the best person, and then if it's a black person, just let it go. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, it's just the whole Biden administration has been a joke. And then I actually say so, but there's like a section in there about, and then there's like this Rachel Levine, who used to be, I think, Larry Levine or something like that. It was a man's name years ago with kids, and this is a person that's some sort of in the health. She has a role in health affairs for the Biden administration. And she like talks openly about, transing kids and like, and it's just, the whole thing is just so bizarre. And so I actually, but that's a small part of the book. The book mainly looks at why corporate America went there and how it went there, and why, and then the backlash it faces.